Hello, everyone. I'm Edwina Murphy, and I'm the Deputy Dean and Director of Research at the Australian College of Theology. And with me today is Bart Kut and Esko Yorkas, and we're going to talk about our new book, Deacons and Diaconia in Late Antiquity, which Esko is going to show us a copy of. Um, Yes, there it is, Deacons and Diaconia in Late Antiquity, which is a follow-up to our earlier volume, Deacons and Diaconia in Early Christianity. So we're going to be talking about both these books today, but celebrating the recent release of Deacons and Diaconia in Late Antiquity. So Bart is a New Testament scholar who works with the Old Testament context, the Jewish context, the patristic context, and he's Professor Emeritus at Tilburg School of Theology. And he's also a Roman Catholic deacon in the Diocese of Haarlem, Amsterdam. And he's also chair of New Testament scholars in the Low Countries. And then Esko taught systematic and practical theology at University of Eastern Finland, and also the other two Finnish schools of theology. And he has been the chairman of the Society for Diaconia Research in Finland. And he's also a priest in the Lutheran Church. And my background is actually in the Baptist Church. So I sometimes joke with people when we're talking about editing the books together. I say, um, you know, a Dutch Catholic and a Finnish Lutheran and an Australian Baptist. It sounds like the beginning to a joke, walk into a bar together. But anyway, it's not a joke. We've edited these two books together, which we've really enjoyed. So we're going to share a bit about it now. So we're going to start with talking about how this project began. So Bart, you might like to start.
Yeah. Um, the there's a society of deacons in the world, the international. It's in German, but it's the International Deacon Center, and it's in German because that's the center. But it is really international. And the president of that society was a Dutchman, Rob Massini. And in it's 15 years ago, 10, 15 years ago, and he saw that there was not enough research on the deacons in the early sources. And he was just working in the parish, and all those people in the board of that center were not so well versed in the sources. And he and together with the Italian deacons decided to make a conference in Rome about the sources of the deacons in the early church. And he asked me to help him. And so we went to Rome to meet the people who were organizing that conference. And in fact, those nice Italian deacons had not organized nothing. There was nothing. And I was a little bit surprised, and I had some contacts in Rome. And so somebody said, if they don't do it, you are now in Rome. Try to find a place to do it. And then I went to the Gregorianum, and there they said nobody knows something about the deacons. And then I went to the Biblicum, that's the Pontifical Institute for Biblical Studies. And they said I was received in the smallest room. And then they said nobody knows something about it. And then I went to the Augustinians, and although there were some problems there, in the end, we were able to do their yearly conference on the sources of the deacons. And that
And
was a
that,
conference. That
yeah.
was a conference on the deacons. And that was a conference in 2009. And then in 2010, the book was published. And so it was the first attempt to look to the sources of the male deacons. The sources of the women deacons, yeah, is well assessed, but it's very small. It's not so much material, but the material is there by Medican and Orsak, a nice book. But about male deacons, there was no any resource. Also not in those books when Schillebeek writes about ministry. He doesn't pay any attention to deacons, and when he says something about deacons, it's wrong. So it and so that book was published, and then one of the Augustinian professors said, "Luckily, there was not so much Bible in it." What means that the early sources were not so well assessed. And then Esco, who was already a long time working on diaconia, deacons, wrote a review of the book of the Italian book. There were also a lot, so it's in English, it's in French, it's a lot in Italian, some in German. So the book is not for all people easy to
No,
assess.
no.
And then Esco invited me to Jeonsu, and then we saw that the early sources were not assessed at all in the Italian book. And in fact, the rector of the Augustinianum already said, you can use the material for a more systematic book. So we did. And then we decided to ask a lot of people we knew already in our own network, people working on diaconia. And then we decided in Jeonsu, when there was a conference about deacons, to redo the ressourcement of the deacons, and that was the first book.
Yeah,
and you and I met in Oxford, and I thought, yeah, we need also. No, it was quite.
It was Birmingham, actually, the British Patristics Conference.
Yeah, it was immediately clear that you could be the edition which we need for a full-blown book from different continents and different disciplines. You are a patristic scholar. I'm New Testament patristic, so the whole basis was there, and that was the first book.
So Esco, as we've said, you've had this history. Tell us a little bit about your background in thinking about deacons and what brought you to this collaboration with Bart in the first place.
It's a very different background, because I am starting with practical theology, very practical questions. For about 40 years ago, somebody was asking me to make research about how the people in the Lutheran Church in Finland understand diaconia. Wrote a book, I collect material, and it was very, very problematic. We found very big disagreements. We don't find any consensus. We had a very many different views. And for me, I was working at the university in Turku at time, and it was very challenging for me. What does this mean? I was looking for a little bit richer, and as Bart told us, we don't have big books about diaconia, and I was looking for books and research, and it was a problem for the churches. The churches doesn't understand or did not understand what diaconia means. In the Lutheran Church of Finland, we had over 50 years discussion, how do we understand the ministry of deacons? Smoothly, I understand this is not only a question for the Lutheran Church in Finland, it's a question also in many other Lutheran churches and also in many other churches. And what shall we do, was the question. And we shall go to the common backgrounds for the churches. And the common background is in the first centuries, in the New Testament, in the patristic material. And the result was a conference in patristic material in Joensuu, in cooperation with Bart and also in cooperation with many other. One of the important...
Probably it's nice to mention here that there was already an Australian man, John Hines, who wrote a lot about it, and he had a beautiful dissertation, probably for quite a lot of people a little bit too difficult. And there was a German scholar, Arnie Henschel, who worked on the New Testament passages. So there were some other scholars already working on
Yes.
and also that German man. But some people
particularly in
saw,
the New Testament material,
yeah, but
starting
Collins
to
worked also,
reconfigure the idea of what diaconia
yeah,
means.
yeah, but Collins also worked on the patristic material, and he worked also on the classic material. So
Yes.
he was, but his
Yes.
book was excellent. But he wrote his dissertation in 1979. The book was only published in 1990. So it took a long time that his results were seen. And you, Esco, met him, or you already saw in, and sort of the mixture was Jörn, so I came to it. Collins was still there. So and then we started to look to those two things: the diaconia, what's the meaning of diaconia, and hey, there are deacons. What did they do, and why were they so important in the early church? Yeah,
And it was not only John Collins who was in Joensuu, it was also Annie Hensel who visited
yeah, that's what
us.
I said. That's what I said.
Yes.
She was also on the conference yeah.
Yeah, so
Yes.
we
And
had
then we,
in Joensuu some of the key people who'd already been thinking about it,
yeah,
as well
Yes.
as some newer people bringing the perspectives.
yeah, yeah, yeah,
So that papers from that conference, as well as some other papers that we subsequently invited,
Yes.
became the basis for Deacons and Diaconia in Early Christianity, which was published in 2018. So Bart mentioned a little bit there about what questions we were hoping to answer in this investigation of deacons. And Esco, the question changed a little bit over the time.
We started with the question, what did deacons do? And we was asking, actually the question for the church is, what shall we do with deacons? It was a question about their tasks. What shall they do this and this and this? That was the question in the first conference and in the second also. But it was not the right question.
Oh,
Perhaps more later.
or maybe an
yeah. And
insufficient question, maybe a limited question. So
yeah,
that's
Yes,
part of it. What did deacons do? But
yes.
you're suggesting there's more to it. What's the more that kind of emerged as when we went
yeah.
through the
And
process?
and my perspective was that I always used hey, you find the word diakonoi in John, the wedding of Cana. What's the meaning there? So I'm really I am always focusing on the text. What is the text saying?
Mm.
And then you find the word diakonoi. What's the text saying about diakonoi in John, in Luke Acts, but also on Clement, in Ignatius? So just focusing on the text, which is a little bit, which is of course the perspective on of a biblical scholar. Yeah,
Yes.
but it's a good combination.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
And in Joensuu we have also the Orthodox tradition and the Lutheran tradition. That means we had to say what the sources are speaking, not what the churches are speaking. But therefore we have found a very nice cooperation with Bart.
Yeah. So, so we've talked a little bit about it. We talked about some of the key people who'd already begun the research. They're in the we've got them in the first book. How did you select the how did we select the contributors to the different to the two volumes?
But so I think that the perspective of this book is slightly different from other books about ministry in the early church. What we did was normally when you have a scholar, Schillebeeckx, Burchell, and I don't know how to pronounce that name, all those Germans, and then Cardinal Pell, and they write a book about the ministry in the early church. They start either in the New Testament or in the early church, and then they assess all the sources. But you are never a specialist in all the sources. We did it the other way around. We saw the sources, and for instance, then you have Ignatius, and for instance, you, Edwina, from the Cyprian. And then we ask you, write about Cyprian. What is he saying about deacons? I myself wrote a book about Augustine and the deacons. It's the first book ever that you look what father of the church of a Christian author says about deacons. While there are a lot of books about Augustine and the priests and Augustines and the bishops. So we asked people, specialists about a certain source. Could you write an article about what your guy or lady says about deacons? And so that was one of the way of collecting contributors. And the interesting point is that some of the scholars say, "Hey, I didn't know that my guy is saying so much about deacons." And for instance, your article about deacons in Cyprian, Edwina, is very enlightening. Yeah, because you see those different things. Yeah.
Yeah.
So that was one of the way we collected. Or specialist in a source, and sometimes also specialist in the word diaconia, for instance, Henschel and Collins. But there are not so much people who were really specialist in the male deacon, the female deacons, which are important and connected to it, but then it's about it, or books.
And I think
is
it
that
makes
an answer?
a difference.
Is that an answer, Edwina?
Yeah.
How we selected?
Yes. Yeah. And I think, and in doing that, in finding experts on the particular authors or on papyri or epigraphic evidence and so on. Through that, we also got a good variety of people coming from different backgrounds, whether different denominational backgrounds or different stages of their scholarly careers or different countries.
Male, female.
So we've got Europeans, Americans, Australians, and
yes,
it's a good good mix. I guess we call English people, maybe is that part of Europe or not? I'm not not now. English as well. So I think that when you're a specialist in a certain topic, it allows you to understand the context better of the way in which the terms are used. And it doesn't just take you to the most obvious passages that you do if you're doing a broad survey across several centuries. So, I think that's a real strength of the books. And of course, Bart and I are doing it again with Murray Smith in our presbyters in the early church and its background. So that'll hopefully be coming out later this year, and maybe we'll do another video for that. We've kind of raised the topic a little bit, but about who we think, well, Esko gave us some of the background why his interest in deacons and its impact on the church at the moment. Let's talk a little about who we hope will benefit from the scholarship that's in these two volumes.
So I think in the first, immediately it's clear that it will help those people who are working on the early church and their authors. Yeah. So I think it's in hidden history, and so it's a new aspect to thinking about leadership in the early church. It's really new. And not only for the early centuries, but also for the later centuries. So you can, in the Middle Ages, there were still a lot of deacons active. Nobody knows. There were cardinal deacons. King Charles, where during the coronation, the royal damati, and that's a very old tradition, that there is a relation between queenship, and some of the deacon issues, and that's clearly related to the fact that deacons were assistant leaders, and kings were assumed to be assistant leaders. So the whole concept of deacons opens up new thinking about leadership and assistant leadership, which is interesting. During ESCO's farewell digital party, one of the most important statesmen of the Netherlands, a former Minister of Justice, gave the presentation because he saw that the word deacon and the word minister are related, and the connecting leadership style of deacons, the servant leadership style of deacons are important for a world nowadays where we have to think about what leadership is. And if you look to all those wars and so, leadership is so important. But in the church, it was always forgotten that deacons were assistant leaders. And in the normal world, in the world outside the church, we also do not think about how important is the vice president and what's happening there. And you know that in Rome and in all those Italian little states, they had always two leaders, consuls. So we have it. The deacon books can help to think about what is leadership, not only in the church but also outside.
Thank you. Esko, did you want to add anything to that?
I will come back to this wrong question. What did deacons do? It was wrong because it was too narrow, and we had to. One of the big results is that we have to discuss about the function of the deacon in the parish. And this what Bart told us about this cooperation. It was the function in the early church. Deacon has done many things, for example, caritative aspects, but it was not important for the deaconship. It was important for the ministry or for the parish life. Almost every ministry was working in a caritative, in helping, or almost every member of the church was taking care of other members of the churches. Therefore, this is one of the big answers for the books. And I think this could be something for the churches also. I am now coming back to my starting point. I started with the Lutheran church, and now I am coming back to the church. Let's take a look on the function of the deacons.
Right.
Yeah, that's possible also the result. So in the thinking in the Roman Catholic Church, they are influenced by the German model for Kriemler, Rahner, those theologians. And they said, we need social workers, and that are the deacons.
Yes.
And that's the model of the German Protestant churches. They said diaconia is social help, which it is not. Diaconia in the New Testament, so you have to go back to the New Testament, is a kind of office of ministry. And in fact, you can see that important is all those different elements, so as the connecting part of diaconia. But Esko struggled his whole life with this concept of diaconia is the same as the social work. And the fun is that the Catholic Church also struggles, since they have those permanent deacons, and they don't know what to do with them, and they can do the social work. This is a Protestant concept.
Yes.
And we have, of course, nothing against Protestant concept, but you have to know what you are doing. And they don't know what they are doing. They say diaconia is social work. That was always, but that's not true. If you go to the sources, diaconia is ministry and deacons are assistant leaders, go-betweens, and so forth on. So the question of Esko is not only important for the Lutheran churches, but also for those Catholic churches who use a Protestant concept to think about their ministry. For instance, the Pope says that it's not necessary that the deacons are at the altar. Well, he is ordained deacon, Pope, and during his ordination, he was as a deacon ordained to minister altaris. So and you know that the old law is lex orandi, lex credendi. So the bishops, when they ordain deacons, say we ordain you to minister altar. So they belong to the altar. How you can say, that's the next step. But and I think that one of the most important thing, why is the deacon there at the altar? Because in a certain sense, in the early church, you were never alone at the altar. Ministry is always shared ministry. So that's the part of the game. And in the Catholic Church, you can see that all those priests are alone at the altar. They are most important. And when there's somebody else share their ministry, that's already another perspective.
I mean, you can see in Cyprian, you see the deacon has the cup, you know. Cyprian tells the story. There's a few horror stories of infants who've been taken to sacrifice and vomiting and so on, and refusing to when they're given the cup. So it's very you can see early on the importance of that.
In the 7th century, Isidore of Sevilla said that the mass was not legal when there was not a deacon.
So and the Protestant way of thinking diaconia is not something we found from the Bible. It's based on the ideology of the 19th century in Germany. They find out that this social working is the understanding of the word diaconia. We don't have this understanding of the word diaconia earlier in German or Swedish or Finnish. It was from the 19th century.
Yeah. So it came out very useful. Like they did a really good thing.
That's what
but it's just not in the sources, or it's a limited view of the sources to restrict it only to social work instead of seeing it something broader. And I think your book, the Go-Betweens, but expresses that kind of model of agency of the deacons operating.
Yeah, but you have to repeat that what Fleetner did was an answer to the same problem as Marx saw. So Fleetner went to England and saw the poverty. And he saw also the Catholic Church with all those sisters and brothers caring for the poor. And he wanted an institute for the Protestant churches where there was care for the poor and the ill people. So he used also a Catholic concept, the concept of monastery, of the sisterhood. So he tried to answer in his own way to the need of his time, which was positive.
And it was a nice answer. It was a nice answer because the people needed help. At that time.
Probably it was a better answer, or it was a better answer than Karl Marx. We don't know. But you can think about it.
Well, thank you very much, Bart and Esko, for joining me to discuss our book. And we're going to have a workshop at Oxford Patristics, so we're recording this in July. So maybe just before or just after you see this video. And looking forward to another follow-up book on presbyters in the early church as well. So thanks for your time.
And Edwina, you also thank you not only for being our host today, but also for cooperating with us.
Yes, and I will also thank everyone who was the author in our books and cooperating. This was a very nice project.
Yes, we enjoyed ourselves.
Thanks. Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.